They say every family has favorites. But what if you were never even in the running? What if, year after year, you watched someone else be celebrated, while you were quietly handed leftovers and expected to smile? My name is Jessica, and this isn't a story about winning the lottery. It's about finally realizing you were never the problem, and learning to stop chasing love that only shows up when it needs something. I used to think if I just worked harder, stayed quiet, and proved myself, maybe they'd see me. Maybe I'd finally belong. But instead they gave my brother a house, and gave me a $2 lottery ticket. No note, no check. Maybe you'll hit it big. I didn't scratch it. I wasn't angry. I was just tired. But months later, on a night I almost didn't go to a party, after a stranger asked one quiet question, everything changed. This is the story of what happened when I finally scratched that ticket and discovered the real jackpot wasn't money. It was freedom. They gave my brother a house and tossed me a lottery ticket. So I walked away, richer than they'll ever know. Based on a true story, told by Jessica. Every family has its own rhythm. Some are built on laughter and balance, and others on silence and favoritism. I was born into a family that made it very clear. My brother Daniel was the star of the show, and I was just the girl who turned off the lights when the applause was over. I still remember that Christmas when I was 7. Daniel tore open the biggest box under the tree and screamed with joy. My mom pulled out her phone to record his happiness, while I unwrapped a $3.99 t-shirt from the clearance rack. Still had the tag on it, some plumbing company's logo across the chest. Too big, too ugly, too thoughtless. And my mom just smiled and said, "Sweetie, you should learn to be content. Daniel's older. He needs more important things." The pattern never changed. Daniel got the car. I got the lecture on practicality. "You're smart. You don't need fancy things," Dad said, as if that made the silence easier to bear. For a long time I tried to earn it. Their attention, their praise, their love. I thought if I worked hard enough, they'd finally look my way and say, "We're proud of you too, Jessica." But here's the truth no one tells you when you're the forgotten one. It's not about how good you are. It's about the story they chose to believe. And I was never written into theirs as the hero. That was the first lesson I ever learned about love. Sometimes it's not that you didn't try hard enough. It's that they never wanted to see you. And the longer you chase what isn't meant for you, the more invisible you become, even to yourself. But the moment that changed everything was the day they handed Daniel a house and handed me a lottery ticket. Let me tell you what happened that day, and why I'll never forget the weight of that envelope in my hand. If there's one phrase I heard more than any other growing up, it was this: you should be grateful. Not in a way that inspired appreciation, but in a way that silenced me. As if gratitude was the price I had to pay for being treated like an afterthought. When Daniel got a new phone just because I got a used one with a cracked screen. "You're practical," Dad said. "You don't need flashy things." When he started college, my parents paid for everything: tuition, rent, even groceries. I got a thick packet of student loan applications and a pep talk on independence. "You're strong," Mom said. "You'll figure it out." And I did. I took 2 part-time jobs and $8 store noodles 5 nights a week. But no one asked if I was okay. No one ever did. First, I believed it was love. That maybe they just didn't show it the way I needed. That maybe if I worked hard enough, they'd notice. But over time I realized they didn't expect me to thrive. They just expected me to cope. And every time I questioned the difference in treatment, I was met with that same old line: "You should be grateful." Grateful for what exactly? For being invisible. For being the one who always gave, but was never allowed to ask. It took me years to understand that guilt was their currency, a way to control without confrontation. "You're so mature. You're not like your brother. You don't need much to be happy." But here's the truth I wish someone had told me sooner. Just because you carry something well doesn't mean it isn't heavy. And just because you've learned to survive in silence, doesn't mean that silence is love. And that brings me to graduation night. When I came home hoping, just maybe, they'd finally see me. But instead they handed me an envelope. One that didn't contain encouragement or help, but a scratch-off ticket. A $2 joke disguised as a gift. That was the moment I stopped hoping and started preparing to leave. Let me take you to that night, the quiet dinner that changed everything. I didn't expect balloons or a party, not even a dinner reservation. But I thought maybe, just maybe, graduating college while juggling 2 jobs would earn me something more than polite applause. Daniel had graduated a year earlier. There was confetti, champagne, cheers from every cousin and neighbor. And a new house, as a gift for all his hard work. For me, a lukewarm burger in a greasy bag. And an envelope that felt heavier than it looked. I opened it slowly. My hands were shaking, not from excitement, but from trying not to expect anything. Inside was a $2 lottery ticket. No message, no card, no acknowledgement of the years I fought just to stand there. Just for fun, my mom said with a chuckle. Maybe you'll hit it big. And my dad, he shrugged and said, you know how it is. All our money went into Daniel's house. That was the moment I knew, truly knew. I had never been part of the plan. Not the emotional plan. Not the financial one. Not even the human one. I didn't get angry. I didn't argue. I just smiled, a hollow, tired smile, and excused myself from the table. Because something inside me had quietly snapped. Not in bitterness, but in understanding. I was done trying to earn love with silence. Done believing that loyalty meant sacrifice without return. That night, while the kitchen light buzzed overhead and the sink dripped its same old rhythm, I packed the only things I truly owned. A worn-out suitcase, a second-hand laptop, and a self-worth that was finally waking up. That was the night I walked away. Not with money, not with revenge, but with a quiet promise. If no one was going to bet on me, I'd learn to bet on myself. And that promise, it led me to a tiny apartment in downtown Cincinnati, and a life I would build from scratch. Just like that forgotten ticket. Let me tell you what that new beginning looked like. There's something strangely peaceful about packing a life into a suitcase. Not because you're running away, but because you finally stopped waiting for someone to ask you to stay. I left the only home I'd ever known with 3 boxes, a backpack, and the kind of freedom that comes when you finally realize you don't need permission to start over. I moved into a studio apartment in downtown Cincinnati. It was barely big enough for a single bed and a desk, and the walls were stained a yellowish off-white. The pipes groaned every time I turned on the faucet, but no one compared me to Daniel. No one told me I was too sensitive. No one told me to be grateful for less. I worked 2 jobs to survive. By day, I was a marketing assistant at a small billboard company. And by night, I clocked into a bakery near the market, wiping tables, serving pastries, cleaning fryer grease from the floor. Most nights, I came home with aching feet, hands smelling like flour and lemon-scented disinfectant. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't emotionally exhausted. I was proud. Every little thing, buying my own groceries, fixing a flickering light bulb, budgeting for a space heater, reminded me that this life, however humble, was mine. I wasn't a background character in someone else's story anymore. I was writing my own. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Instagram-worthy. But it was real. And I had earned every inch of it. My family, they rarely texted. The group chat, still filled with pictures of Daniel, his new car, his vacations, his perfect smiling life. I tried once just to say hello. All I got was a thumbs-up emoji from my dad. That was it. And that lottery ticket, it sat in a drawer next to a few quarters, a broken pen, and a note from my landlord about a leaking pipe. I hadn't scratched it. Not because I forgot, but because deep down I believed it wouldn't matter. It was just another joke in a long line of reminders that I was never worth more than a $2 chance. But here's the lesson life was quietly trying to teach me. Sometimes it's not about what's in your hands. It's about what's finally in your heart. And for the first time, I was starting to believe I deserved more. That belief would take time. But it would also open a door I never expected. One that began the night a coworker asked a simple, powerful question. "Hey Jessica, why don't you ever talk about your family?" There was a small drawer in my apartment. The kind of drawer you never really open, unless you're looking for something you lost a long time ago. Inside were a few loose coins, an old pen that had dried out, a half-burnt birthday candle I couldn't explain why I kept, and that scratch-off lottery ticket. It had been sitting there for months, unused, unimportant, unwanted, just like I had felt for most of my life. I'd walk by that drawer every night, sometimes pausing, running my fingers over the folded paper, like it held some secret I wasn't ready to hear. Not because I thought I'd win, but because even after all this time, some part of me still believed I didn't deserve anything better. That little ticket was never about luck. It was about how little they thought of me. And that belief stayed with me. In the way I said sorry when I didn't need to. In the way I made myself smaller in every room. In the way I always let other people speak first, just in case my voice didn't matter. Until one Friday night at a coworker's party, someone asked a question I wasn't prepared for. "Hey Jessica, how come I never hear you talk about your family?" Paused, then quietly said, "Maybe because they never really saw me as part of it." She didn't ask anything else. She just nodded. And in that silence, something shifted. Felt seen. Not pitied. Not judged. Just acknowledged. It was a small crack. But sometimes that's all it takes to let something in. That night when I got home, I opened the drawer again. Not with hope, but with a kind of quiet defiance. A whisper inside saying, "You don't have to stay invisible anymore." I didn't know what I'd find underneath that silver coating. But I knew this. I was ready to stop living like a question mark in my own life. And what happened next would change everything. Have you ever felt like the outsider in your own family? Like no matter how much you give, you're always the one left out of the picture. If Jessica's story reminds you of something you've been through, take a moment and share it in the comments. Whether it's a memory, a lesson, or just how this story makes you feel, we'd love to hear it. Because sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward healing. I didn't scratch the ticket because I was feeling lucky. I scratched it because I was tired. Tired of believing I didn't matter. Tired of letting their version of me define my worth. Tired of walking past that drawer like it was a mirror of all I'd never be. I laid the ticket down on the table, grabbed a pen cap, and gently scraped away the silver coating. One number, then another, then another. My heart started to pound. First I thought I was imagining things, so I repeated the numbers under my breath. 14, 27, 33, 42, 56. I checked the state's lottery website on my phone, blinking hard just to focus. $134 million. $134 million. I didn't scream. I didn't laugh or cry. I just sat there completely still, with my fingers pressed lightly to my chest, like I needed to make sure my heart was still beating. In that moment nothing changed, and yet everything did. I had always believed I had to hustle for crumbs, to prove my worth to people who wouldn't lift a finger for me. And suddenly, in the quietest moment of my life, the universe whispered something different. You were never the problem. I didn't call anyone. There wasn't a single person in my life I trusted with this. Because deep down I knew, if I told my family, their first question wouldn't be, "How are you feeling?" It would be, "How much are you giving?" That same night, I sat down at my laptop and typed, "What to do when you win the lottery?" Followed every piece of advice. I made a list. I picked the top names in the city. And the next morning, I booked an appointment with someone named Carol Whitman, a woman whose face I'd never seen, but whose job from that moment on would be to help me build something real. Not just wealth, but a future no one could take away from me again. Let me tell you what happened in Carol's office, and how, for the first time in my life, I sat at a table where I didn't feel small. Carol's office smelled like peppermint tea. Soft jazz played in the background, and for the first time in forever, felt safe. I told her everything about the ticket, my family, my fears. And she didn't look surprised. She just nodded, smiled gently, and said, "This isn't magic. It's a new beginning. Let's treat it that way." Together we built a plan. An LLC to claim the money in privacy. A team to handle taxes, investments, legal details. Everything I never thought I'd need, because I never thought I'd be allowed to have this kind of life. A few weeks later, I moved out of my old apartment. No mansion. No marble fountain. Just a cozy 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, where maple trees turned red in the fall and birds sang in the morning. I bought a used hybrid Lexus. Sleek, safe, but nothing flashy. And for a while I kept my daytime job. Not because I needed the money, but because I needed time to adjust to this version of myself. The only job I gave up immediately was the night shift at the bakery. I left a handwritten letter and a small check to help expand the pastry display. I didn't want to disappear. I wanted to leave well. That's something no one ever taught me. Leaving in peace is just as powerful as arriving with purpose. Every morning, I brewed fresh coffee in my own kitchen, sunlight pouring in through tall windows. And for the first time, I didn't flinch at quiet. I embraced it. I started writing again. Not emails or resumes, but children's stories. Silly ones, magical ones. Brave little characters who never fit in, but found their way anyway. I took a watercolor class at a nearby studio. I planted lavender along the fence. I built a bookshelf, tall and sturdy, like the woman I was becoming. This life didn't scream. It didn't flash. Hum. And in that hum, I found something no money could buy. But of course, peace doesn't go unnoticed for long, especially when your last name still exists in your family group chat. And one quiet afternoon, that peace was interrupted by a message from someone I hadn't heard from in a long time. My mother. Peace has a funny way of attracting attention, especially from the people who never gave it to you. It started with a photo in a neighborhood group chat. My new white Tesla parked by the curb, mailbox labeled S. King. The caption read, "New neighbor alert. Anyone know what she does? Free coffee for the best guess." I hadn't put my name out there. Everything was registered through my LLC. But somehow, the whisper had started. A few days later, I got a message from my cousin Lucas. "Your mom's asking around. Says you came into some money?" I didn't reply. Then came the calls. Missed ones from my mom. Then a text. "Sweetheart, we miss you. Let's talk." I didn't block the number. I wanted to see just how far they'd go. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. For 2 weeks they kept coming. "We're making your favorite stew this Sunday. Family is forever, Jessica. You'll always be part of us." But they never asked how I was doing. Never said, "We're proud of you." Only that they wanted me near again. Now that something had changed. One morning, I watched from behind the maple tree as they parked outside my gate. Daniel behind the wheel. Mom in the passenger seat. Her eyes full of curiosity, not care. They didn't knock. They didn't call. They just watched, like I was something to be studied. That night a new message came in. "We need to talk. We'll visit you soon." And suddenly it was clear. This wasn't a reunion. It was a transaction waiting to happen. So I made a decision. One rooted in strength, not spite. I agreed to dinner. One night. One table. One chance to see it for what it really was. Not because I wanted their approval, but because I was ready, finally ready, to face the very people who once made me believe I had no voice. What happened at that dinner wasn't shocking, but it was unforgettable. The house looked exactly the same. The white picket fence, a cracked walkway, the swing on the porch still creaking in the wind. But I wasn't the same girl who used to hope that if she just tried a little harder, they'd love her louder. "You're so skinny," Mom said with a quick once-over, then disappeared into the kitchen. Dad nodded like I was a neighbor passing through. Daniel greeted me with a back pat and a grin too wide to be real. The table was already set, and the script was already written. Conversations floated around Daniel. His wedding, his baby on the way, their backyard renovations. I sat silently, eating slowly, counting each minute like a timer ticking toward a familiar letdown. "I have something to say," my mother began. Her voice that familiar tone. Soft enough to sound sweet, sharp enough to cut. "Daniel and Haley are so excited for the wedding," she smiled. "And with the house expansion and all the guests, well, it's getting expensive." She looked right at me. "We thought maybe if you could help. Just a little something around $100,000. You know, to build the new garage and help with the wedding." That word again. Family. The word they only used when they needed something. I looked around the table. People who had watched me struggle. Who knew I'd eaten instant noodles for weeks. Who never once asked if I was okay. Where was family, I asked, when I was in college? When I worked night shifts to keep the lights on? When I begged for encouragement and got silence instead? They didn't answer. They didn't know how to. "What was it you used to say to me?" I tilted my head at Mom. "No one's stopping you from working harder, right?" I stood up, picked up my purse. "I used to hope you'd see me," I said, voice unwavering. "I used to hope to be part of this family. But not anymore." I turned to Daniel, offering a small smile. "And if you really want to expand that garage, no one's stopping you from working harder." I walked away from the house that had once defined me. Not in anger, but in peace. Because this time I didn't feel like I was giving something up. I felt like I was finally taking something back. My worth, my voice, my story. That night I drove home in silence. No music, no podcast, just the sound of tires against pavement. And freedom in my chest. But what happened after that? The quiet, beautiful days that followed were more powerful than any dramatic goodbye. Let me tell you what healing really looked like. Life moved on, and so did I. Not with noise or a need to prove myself, but with quiet mornings, pages filled with children's stories, and the scent of fresh lavender outside my window. I invested in small things. A cozy publishing house, a cabin in Vermont, watercolor classes, ukulele lessons, a porch swing under the sun. None of it was for show. All of it was for me. I stopped checking the family group chat. I stopped answering questions that didn't come with care. And I started living like I didn't owe anyone an explanation for my happiness. Until one Saturday afternoon it happened. I was standing in line at my favorite bakery, ordering my usual lemon scone, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said with a weak smile. "You live around here?" He nodded. "Yeah, close by. You?" He looked down at the bag in his hand. "Just picking up pastries for Haley. She's pregnant again." Then he paused. "Mom still talks about you a lot." I didn't respond, just waited. Daniel looked at me, this time more serious. "You know, sometimes I think life's just not fair." I tilted my head, no bitterness in my voice. "I agree. Life isn't fair. But I've learned how to make it fair for myself." He opened his mouth to speak again, then closed it. A bakery worker called my name. I took the warm paper bag, nodded at Daniel. "I really do wish you the best," I said. "I mean that." Then I turned and walked out. The golden sun wrapping itself across the sidewalk, like a quiet blessing. I didn't need to win. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to live. And that's exactly what I did. I wasn't a second choice anymore. I wasn't the backup plan or the forgotten sibling. I was Jessica, whole, worthy, and finally free. And here's what I learned. Sometimes the most powerful thing you'll ever do is choose yourself and never apologize for it. I didn't need applause. I just needed that one moment of truth. A life I created. A voice I reclaimed. Story I now own completely. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away to finally find peace? Tell us in the comments how Jessica's journey spoke to you. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more soul stories about worth, resilience, and becoming who you were always meant to be. Thank you for spending this time with us. Jessica's journey wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming her worth and finally walking away from the people who never saw her value to build a life where she did. So now we ask you, what lesson did this story leave with you? Have you ever had to choose yourself over approval? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part of her journey spoke to you most. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories about healing, resilience, and rediscovering your voice.